Welcome to The Impact. I'm Dr. Jane. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have a good friend and colleague, Luis Buenaventura from the Philippines, from Bloom Solutions. And we were just recollecting that the last time we met was in Paris at a conference at the OECD talking about remittances. That was in January, but at that time, I think neither of us had the slightest idea what would happen afterwards. Luis, wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
So remittances is obviously a tremendously important topic in the Philippines because a third of your economy is actually based on overseas workers sending money home. And I recently read that the Department of Labor had released some statistics that said that there are about 100,000 Filipino overseas workers who've now either been stood down or lost their jobs. So getting money cheaply and fast to people is going to be tremendously important. Tell us a little bit about what Bloom does and how you do it.
Sure. So Bloom has been around for about 5 years now, and we were founded on the premise that you could use cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology to reduce the cost of international remittance. And as you said, it's very relevant to the Philippine population because such a large part of our economy is dependent on this stuff. And the work that we do centers very much around the challenge of international settlement. Like, how do you actually move the money from, say, a country like the United States, a region like the Middle East? How do you actually bring the actual funds back into the country in the cheapest way possible? So we've done a lot of work using, well, back when we started, it was really just Bitcoin as the only game in town. But, you know, that's changed tremendously in the past 5 years also. Now you've got stable coins. Now you've got blockchains that are only focused on international money transfer, right? So you've got a lot of options now. We've tried quite a few of them, and we've certainly made some strides in the direction of really dropping the price on these things. And I think that what we're seeing this year is that it's becoming very relevant, even more so than it already was. But then B, also, like, we're starting to see newer players take notice again, right? And these tend to be a little seasonal, but in the case of 2020, you've got decentralized finance, the DeFi movement, that is looking at things like international remittance and things like that, and trying to build decentralized solutions for these things. So we're seeing a kind of a resurgence of interest from the crypto sector to try to improve things even further here.
So just, in terms of what you've seen with your business during the pandemic, have you noticed any trends or changes in what's coming your way?
Yeah, I mean, tons, right? I would say firstly that kind of just macro numbers, it's supposedly significantly more than 100,000 migrant workers that are going to be sent back home. The numbers that I was seeing was closer to 300,000, but that is kind of a staged event. That's not going to happen all at once. But that being said, they're going to come back here to find most of the industries shut. Right. The second quarter GDP report for the Philippines has shown that we dropped by 16%, which is the single largest recorded drop in the history of our country. So that's a very, very significant hit. Things like manufacturing, things like transportation, all of those have taken double-digit dives, as you can probably expect when most of the country is in lockdown. So we're about, so our lockdown started on March 15th. And as I'm speaking to you now, we are still in lockdown, and it is a very, very strange world out there. Everyone has suddenly been forced to go online. So that's one thing. And we are seriously taxing the online infrastructure of basically every provider that you can think of. Everyone from the telcos to the banks are suddenly kind of seeing quadruple the number of users, because it's really hard to make contingency plans for a global pandemic. Like, I don't think anyone was expecting that it was going to be this bad, this long, and all of that stuff. So.
So what about in terms of the volumes that you're seeing or the value that you're seeing or any changes, you know, in what's actually going through your kind of remittance service?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we observed was that the remittance volume was starting to take on a different channel. So traditionally, remittances in the Philippines, about 60% of them come in as a cash payment. They need to be disbursed to the final recipient as hard cash. Obviously, that is problematic right now because many of the cash pickup locations can't stay open. Many of them still do. They still are open, but you know, kind of, it's not easy to even get your staff to the locations because there's no transportation at the moment. So you've got all of these logistical challenges to actually maintaining a network of, you know, physical settlement. And what we're seeing is that many of the transactions that used to be destined for cash pickup are kind of being rerouted into mobile money. And that data has been verified by the mobile money operators themselves. They've said that, you know, they've seen 3 to 4 times the number of new signups, because that's kind of the only way that you can receive the funds, even if there were funds coming in. So that's one of the most important things. You know, we used to joke that it would take an entire generation to move the Philippines from, you know, cash is king
Just took a
to
pandemic.
mobile money. It took a pandemic. Which is, I don't know, I don't know how I feel about that, but it is what it is, right? So we're finally at the point where mobile money is kind of finally taking hold and people finally see the convenience of having it. They haven't really released kind of official numbers. I don't think they ever really will, but I would say that we're at least probably 30% penetration right now, which is a marked difference from where we were in 2019. So you know, that is something, certainly. So both the kind of the shape of the remittances that we've been facilitating have changed. The volume has decreased slightly. That was kind of expected. But kind of on the other side of my business, since we are through and through a cryptocurrency trading platform also, we're seeing a heck of a lot more people buying this stuff just locally. So our retail trading practice has just skyrocketed over the last few months. And
so
we
do you
attribute
think that's like a store of value, or are people transacting in it?
So I would say that the store of value folks are probably the minority. I think that the majority of these people are buying into Bitcoin, Tether, things like that, because they need to do other stuff online and they don't have credit cards. So it's a method of online international payment. You know, there's a lot of kind of a very big kind of cottage industry of folks that are just micro entrepreneurs. So they're buying Bitcoin from Bloom. They are using that Bitcoin to buy Netflix cards or Spotify cards or iTunes cards, and then they're reselling that to their neighbors, to their kind of their village out in the kind of the rural area of the country, and they're making money that way. Because you know, you really you gotta hustle, right? I mean, the unemployment's through the roof. People are trying to be as creative as possible. And for better or for worse, we're finding ways to kind of make the most out of the situation, kind of just doing these very informal micro businesses. And, you know, Bloom has been fortunate that, you know, we found ourselves kind of in the center of that as one of the kind of the most well-priced crypto providers in the country. We're able to at least kind of help kickstart this new movement. And that's been a really heartening thing to see for us, that, you know, that I mean, you're right, that there is resilience. It seems to be a relatively positive trend of growing small businesses again.
Well, I mean, one of the figures that I've seen is estimates by the World Bank that across the world, 100 million people could fall into extreme poverty. And, you know, obviously there are some very, very poor populations in the Philippines. So enabling them to be micro entrepreneurs, but also getting any whether it's remittances from family or government subsidies directly to people who don't have bank accounts, is going to be even more critical than it was before.
For sure, for sure. You know, like domestically, Bloom's work mostly only revolves around fiat. So because, you know, kind of once you're within country, the crypto solution doesn't actually work all that well, right? I mean, you really just want to send peso to someone else, and that's kind of it. So we also act as a payment rails domestically. That is powered by, you know, kind of all of the banks and all of the kind of cash pickup locations and all of the mobile money solutions and all of that. So we kind of bring all that together under a single platform, and our partners overseas can use that, can access that, kind of a single point of entry into any payment channel in the country. So it's a big part of our core focus.
But it is interesting though, isn't it? There's this theme that seems to be recurring, that the pandemic has been an accelerant for innovation and people to come up with, you know, new ideas and new ways of doing things. So it's really fascinating to hear your story. Are you seeing any other kind of acceleration of innovation outside of what you're doing in the Philippines that would be interesting to share with the viewers?
Well, earlier I was talking about decentralized finance, that whole movement which is kind of a subsector of the cryptocurrency ecosystem. You know, they weren't that big like 2 years ago, but it's really skyrocketed in just the last 3 to 4 months. They are only beginning to start spinning out these solutions that are remittance focused. There are a bunch of organizations and foundations that are doing similar things. One of the newest ones, one that I quite like, is called Celo.org, CELO.org. And they're doing a stable coin that is oriented around international money transfer. But, you know, it's not just them. There's quite a few projects right now that are focusing on this space. And the idea is that you want to drive the cost down to near zero, such that you don't have to worry so much about kind of the slippage that you will normally see from converting, say, a euro or a US dollar to the local currency. So that's the goal. We'll see how much of this stuff sticks. You know, so maybe we'll do another call in 2021, and then I'll give you like an update of how everything is going. But there's certainly a lot of energy that's being poured into this stuff right now.
No, there's certainly a lot of noise in the DeFi space. Sure. Let me ask you one more question though, because I think often people throw up the volatility of crypto as a reason not to use it for, you know, the purposes that Bloom uses it for. Can you just speak a little bit about how you handle the volatility of crypto in the way that you work?
Sure. So if you look at it from the point of view of Bloom as a remittance counterpart, you know, a lot of our overseas partners will fund us with Bitcoin, and we'll immediately turn that into peso. So we eliminate the volatility risk just by immediately selling that Bitcoin elsewhere. So we don't tend to hold, we don't tend to take long positions in Bitcoin or in any cryptocurrency for that matter. Our job is to provide a price that is stable and reliable. So when our partners use us, when we give them a price for it, they know that that price is good. And there's no volatility risk from the point of view of the remitting partner. That's completely Bloom's job. And because Bloom is a professional market maker, we take that Bitcoin or that other cryptocurrency and we immediately liquidate it elsewhere. Precisely where we do that, that is a mechanism that, you know, kind of changes day to day depending on where we can get the best prices. But from a user standpoint, the volatility is not there. They don't feel any of that volatility. And that was the only way that you could make a system like this viable for consumers, right? They can't have to worry about volatility. They're already worried about a million other things. So you have to get rid of stuff like that, for sure.
So you've been around, you know, for quite a long time in the crypto world. How has your regulator been during this period of time? You've been a real survivor, so something must be going well.
I'm not going to lie. We are definitely one of the fortunate ones. We've gone through two major bull runs and kind of the ensuing winters after that. So we've managed to survive two of them. I think that part of the reason is kind of the willingness to work within kind of the regulated and compliant kind of space. I'm as libertarian as the next crypto guy, but I'm also realistic when it comes to scaling a proper business. I mean, you do have to work within the laws of the jurisdiction that you're operating in, right? And I think that's just that's a reasonable position to take. In the Philippines case, the licensing framework for this stuff was released in 2017. We got our license in 2018. So we've been fully compliant ever since then, and it's opened up lots of doors, right? So at the very least, it'll open up doors with kind of commercial banks that are no longer, constantly checking, every single transaction you make. I mean, it opens up a lot of opportunity there. You don't have to worry about it so much, and then obviously it creates a layer of trust amongst the larger institutional clients of our company, because getting a license, staying compliant, all of that stuff is hard. It requires a certain level of professionalism that you wouldn't get from just some random person that happens to be maybe a hotshot trader, but if you're not licensed, it doesn't mean as much. So yeah, it has been an advantage. It's been a lot of work, but I would say that it's definitely worth it, because it allows us to kind of graduate to the next step, the next stage of business growth.
No, congratulations. And just before we finish off, you wrote a book. So tell us about the book.
Yeah, so the book's called The Little Bitcoin Book. I'm one of the co-authors. The list of authors is actually pretty diverse. When we got together, it was like a total of 6 different time zones that people had to fly in for when we got together to write it. We actually wrote it in a single week in California. So it was a real challenge, but it was great fun. It's meant to be a very non-technical explanation of why Bitcoin exists, what the problems it's trying to solve are, and kind of what the use cases are for the normal person. So we tried very much to avoid kind of the whole the cryptography side of Bitcoin is a fascinating side of it, but not for the average person. So we wanted to write a book that our folks could read, which they have, and I'm very happy to report that my dad kind of understands it a little bit more now that I have that book for him. So it's called The Little Bitcoin Book, and you can check it out on littlebitcoinbook.com.
Well, I highly recommend it, because you did give me a copy in Paris, and I think it's fantastic. So well done. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you.